The Vatrax Accord, a story of debt and memory. They called it the Vatrax Accord. It was supposed to be some grand peace treaty signed by shaking hands after a terrible war. Almost destroyed the galaxy. 100 different alien species came together under one banner after the Zerith War nearly tore everything apart. But humanity wasn't even invited to that meeting. Not until we saved them all from dying out completely. Nobody talks about that part anymore. There are no statues or medals or thank you messages, just silence. I still remember what the sky looked like back then. It was red from all the fires burning in space, and black from all the broken ships floating around. The Archie fleet was falling apart, and the whole star system was screaming for help. Earth answered that call. We sent everything we had left to save them. I was there. I saw it happen. And I watched as those ungrateful aliens left us behind afterward. No medical ships came to help our wounded soldiers. No supplies were sent. Just a buried thank you message hidden in a pile of fancy diplomatic paperwork. They thought we would forget about the debt they owed us. They thought humanity would crawl back to our little dirt planet and stay quiet like good little creatures. They were wrong. Dead wrong. 20-7 years. That's how long it took us to come back. Not because we were rebuilding from the war, but because we were becoming something else. Something sharper and meaner, and hungrier for justice. And now, we were ready to collect what they owed us. My name doesn't matter anymore. I've changed it too many times to count, but the galaxy will remember what I did. What we all did. Because this time, we weren't coming to help anyone. We were coming to collect a debt. They couldn't see it yet, not fully. The trading worlds thought it was just business as usual. The rich Cathari families thought Earth's rise was cute and harmless. The Januar trade group just put more restrictions on our shipping routes again. Same old patterns, same old arrogance. Let them think that way. It bought us time we needed. Because right now, orbiting around their most protected planets without their sensors catching us, was the fleet they forgot we could even build. And at the heart of it all sat Project Revenant. This was the weapon we built using our own pain as fuel, forged from Earth's betrayal and designed for one purpose only: to remind the galaxy that a debt left unpaid doesn't just sit quietly in the corner. It grows teeth. I stood on the command deck of the Vigils, and the main ship of the Revenant fleet. Cold steel under my boots, no comfort anywhere, just purpose driving us forward. I asked for a status report. Lieutenant Brandt said our fleet was holding formation perfectly. He was young, maybe too young for this kind of work, but his hatred ran deep and true. He lost his father on Araba's prime, left to bleed out while the Allied forces saved their own people first. That kind of pain turns a man into a living weapon. I asked about communications. Everything was silent. Ghost mode was active and no enemy signals were pinging from any direction. Good. We were close now. The Arcus stronghold used to be the center of the Galactic rescue mission. Now it was the bloated capital city of hypocrites, and it was just one jump away from us. I gave the order to prepare the payload. Brandt looked at me when I said to load everything we had. Full-scale destruction. All of it. A moment passed between. US, no questions from him. Just a nod of understanding. We weren't here to send some polite message. We were the message itself. The bridge went quiet as the crew moved to their positions. Every single person had scars from the betrayal. Everyone had buried someone because of what happened. None of them were shiny medals. Just the emblem burned into their right sleeves. A broken chain over a blood-red star. Outside our ship, space whispered the way it always did. Cold, vast, and indifferent to our pain, but not for long. Humanity was done asking politely for what we deserved. We remembered the debt, and we came back to collect it with interest. Space doesn't scream when you heard it, it just waits. That was the first lesson I learned out there, long before Earth decided to stop being polite to ungrateful aliens. The second lesson was harder. No one respects the hand that saved them. They only respect the hand that reminds them who has the real power. Now, as the Vigil's end crept closer to Arcus space, the crew held on to silence like it was sacred. Not because they were afraid anymore. We had moved past fear years ago. What held us now was focus. The kind that sharpens men into something ancient and dangerous. Brandt announced we had 7 minutes until final approach. His voice was low, and his knuckles were white around the rail he gripped. I asked if there were any enemy signals. He shook his head. Nothing yet. Their early warning systems were too confident in their safety. Perfect. We had spent 2 years sneaking into their outer shipping routes, rewriting their security codes, and making our ships look like harmless trading vessels. They were still watching for the old Earth, scattered, struggling, and slow. They hadn't realized we had studied their blind spots better than they had studied our weaknesses. I ordered all units to go to black mode. No transmissions unless it was a kill switch. Priority. Brant passed along the command. The deck lights dimmed to red. Somewhere far beneath our feet, Revenant Protocol finished starting up. I could feel the pulse of its core humming through the ship like a second heartbeat. Every ship in our fleet had one, powerful enough to level a moon. These weren't just weapons. They were judgments waiting to be delivered. But we weren't here to destroy everything without thinking. No, that would be too easy. We were here to remind them what they had done to us. My cabin was small compared to other fleet commanders. No decorations or flags, just a steel desk, 2 hard chairs, and a sealed case welded to the wall. It hadn't been touched since the day Earth signed the ceasefire agreement. Inside were photos of the Titan's fall, the cruiser we lost during the last battle. 72 human crew members were abandoned by the Vatrax Alliance. When the Cathari demanded withdrawal from Sector 19, they called it tactical redeployment. We called it betrayal. My brother died on that ship. So did Brant's father. So did thousands of others. And still we came back from it stronger. That's what they never understood about humans. We don't forget our pain. I opened the case. The photo sat there, burned along the edges with blood smeared across the bottom right corner. A scavenger team had retrieved it 3 months after the battle. All that remained of the Titan's fall was scrap metal and silence. Beneath the photo was the last message broadcast. Before everything went dark. I played it every time before combat began. A man's voice crackled through the speakers, ragged and breaking apart. We were told they'd cover us. We're holding the line. Requesting evacuation. Anyone. We're still here. The last word always cut the deepest. Please, but help never came. Not the rescue ships, not even the basic decency of acknowledgement. They buried the battle under secret reports and diplomatic complications. 6 minutes remaining. I moved back to the bridge. The Vigil's end coasted forward with her fleet just behind her. 12 Revenant-class warships and 16 Shadowrunners. Smaller ships, but deadlier in close-range fighting. All cloaked and all silent. Our target wasn't just Arcus, it was the pinnacle, the central space station above Arcus Prime. Headquarters of the Council. Every major power that betrayed us had representatives there. From the bloated diplomatic corps to the smug, snake-eyed Cathari. Clan heads. And now they would see what Earth had become. I asked for arsenal status. Brant reported that weapons were cold, but Revenant was preloaded. Targets were locked in. All ships were synchronized and ready. I nodded and gave the order. On my mark. Break silence and broadcast Revenant Signal Prime. He turned to me with a question in his eyes. You sure about this? I had been sure for 27 years. Once we began, there would be no going back. I told him to execute the order. A single command sent through quantum compression channels. Every ship in the fleet lit up. Not visibly or audibly, but in code. The Revenant signal was never just an order. It was a declaration of war. It reached Arcus systems in seconds. And then the stars seemed to flinch. Every orbital station blinked to life at once. Emergency sensors screamed across a dozen frequencies. Artificial intelligence cores triggered lockdowns everywhere. But it was already too late for them. We were inside their walls. Vigil's end burst from its invisibility cloak. Followed by the rest of the fleet. The illusion dropped away, and suddenly there was Earth steel staring down the pride of the galaxy. The Pinnacle tried to launch defense drones, but our computer code had rewritten them a month ago. They turned inward and blew their own launch. Bays to hell. Fire bloomed in the darkness. Screams echoed across the communication channels. And we didn't say a single word. The face of the Council High Lord appeared on our main screen. Pale blue skin, gold robes, and antlers that made him look more like a fantasy creature than something real. You're violating a galactic treaty. He barked at us. This is an act of war. No, I cut him off. This is a collection. He blinked in confusion. What? I stepped forward to look directly into his eyes through the screen. You made a promise. Earth came when you called for help. We bled for you. We buried our dead for you. And you walked away like it meant nothing. You didn't just forget the debt you owed us. You spat on the graves of those who paid it with their lives. This is madness, he protested. I shook my head. No, this is memory. And humans have a very long one. Then I gave the signal. A single Revenant warhead launched. Not at their cities or their people, but straight through the core of the Pinnacles. Communication relay. Clean and surgical. The station went dark. The Council was now isolated with no way to reach their fleet and no way to call for reinforcements. For the first time in a generation, they were completely alone. We boarded the Pinnacle within 10 minutes. Dropships swarmed it like angry hornets, punching through hull plating and flooding the inside with armed human soldiers dressed in black. Silent, methodical, and furious. I led the charge into the council chamber myself. They expected shouting and angry speeches. Instead, they got judgment delivered quietly. I stepped onto the marble floor with my gun still cold and my blade sheathed. At my side, the chamber's glass ceiling above us showed the chaos outside. Fires burned across the station, while Earthships locked down every path of retreat. The High Lord was still standing, along with half a dozen diplomats. The Cathari ambassador, smug even now, hissed as I approached. "You wouldn't dare harm council representatives," he said, puffing out his chest. "Not unless you want the wrath of every—" I shot him in the leg. He dropped to the floor screaming. Anyone else want to finish that sentence? No one spoke. Good. I turned to the High Lord. "We're not conquerors. We don't want your planets, your technology, or your money." He scowled. "Then what the hell do you want?" "Acknowledgement," I said simply. After a moment of silence, I continued. "I want you to admit what happened at Erebus, at Titan's Fall, at Arc 7. I want you to tell your people that Earth saved your alliance and you spat on us for it. I want every school child in the galaxy to learn our name with respect. Not pity, not fear. Respect." "You'll never get that," he said defiantly. I nodded slowly. "Then we'll burn this whole station to the ground. And we'll do the same to every council world that dares fly the Alliance flag. You're monsters," he whispered. "No," I replied calmly. "You made us this way. You just didn't expect the monsters to remember everything." They signed the declaration that night, on their knees with trembling hands. Every network in the galaxy broadcast it live. Earth's debt was repaid in full, with interest. The humans who were left behind, the soldiers who died without recognition, they finally had their justice. But even as the ink dried on the papers, I felt nothing inside. No triumph, no joy, just a cold emptiness, because vengeance doesn't heal old wounds. It only ends the cycle of pain, and sometimes that's enough. As the vigil's end pulled away from the ruined station, I looked out the viewport one last time. Fires still burned in orbit. Ships still hung in shattered silence. The stars were still watching everything. Let them watch. Let them remember. Because we did what no other species dared to do. We repaid our debt in full. And the galaxy finally understood something important. When humans come to collect what they're owed, mercy isn't part of the contract. The flames had barely cooled before the hypocrisy started crawling back in. They called it a historic reconciliation and paraded it across every galactic news channel, as if they had come to the negotiating table willingly. Not a single word about the fleet that hovered just outside sensor range, locked and loaded with weapons. Not a whisper about the guns we pointed at their heads. They spun the story like they were the victims who had chosen diplomacy over destruction. That was fine by me. Let them lie to their people. Let them pretend they still had control over the situation. The truth was carved into the wreckage of the Pinnacle, floating in orbit like a monument no one wanted to look at. The truth was in the eyes of every soldier who stood silent as the council signed our terms with bloodied hands. The truth was what we had become. We were back aboard the Vigil's end when the final transmission came in. Brant read from the encrypted report. The Council has ratified the Human Restoration Agreement. Effective immediately, Earth is granted unrestricted Tier 1 access to galactic trade, military technology, and diplomatic recognition. Reparations to be delivered within 7 cycles. I stood at the viewport, staring at the ruined station behind us. Chunks of metal floated silently, drifting like broken promises through space. "Anything about our fallen soldiers?" I asked. Brant was quiet for a moment. A brief acknowledgement. 6 lines. Says they regret the loss of brave human lives during previous conflicts. I clenched my jaw tight. 6 lines for 70,000 graves. He looked at me carefully. "We made them sign it. That's what matters, right? Was it really? We had come seeking recognition, justice, and a seat at the table they had once slammed in our faces. And we got it. But what we paid along the way, what we lost in the process, couldn't be signed back into existence with any treaty." A few days later, we landed on Erebus Prime. It used to be a bloodbath during the war, a mining colony that got caught in the middle of the fighting. Now it was just a graveyard. No flags or monuments anywhere. Just rows of makeshift tombs with names etched into rusting metal plates. Names most of the galaxy would never speak aloud. But we knew them all. Every soldier who came with me had someone buried here. We walked among the graves in complete silence. Helmets off, weapons holstered. There was no war here anymore, just memory. I found my brother's plate near the back. Davin. Simple, short, and misspelled. The council hadn't even bothered to get it right when they submitted casualty reports. I told him not to sign up. I said to no one in particular. Told him to stay back and wait it out. But he believed in what Earth stood for back then. Said we had to prove we belonged in the galaxy. Brant knelt beside his father's grave, brushing dirt off the metal plate. He didn't speak, just stared at the name behind us. The rest of the soldiers stood in neat rows, watching and waiting. This wasn't some fancy ceremony. There weren't any hymns or salutes or polished speeches. Just the silence we had earned through blood and pain. The silence we own now. We left our unit patches behind. Burned fabric pieces placed on the graves. No medals or ribbons, just that black and red emblem we all wore. A broken chain over a bleeding star. That was all we had left to give them. The galaxy moved fast after that day. Humans were suddenly the newest power brokers in every major decision. We were offered trade alliances, technology swaps, and even seats on regional councils. The same smug diplomats who had ignored our calls for help were now tripping over themselves to send envoys with too many teeth in their smiles. Some of our own people called it a victory. But I knew better. When power changes hands in the galaxy, the next war doesn't begin with bombs exploding. It starts with whispers in dark corners. It began in the outer frontier regions. A human cargo ship went missing en route to a Cathari-controlled shipping lane. Official reports claimed engine failure. But when our scouts pulled the wreck from empty space, we found bullet holes in the pilot's skull and Cathari symbols carved into the hull. I stood in the command room holding the investigation report. Do they think we're idiots? I asked. Brant looked exhausted. They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we snap back. They think we won't fight because we're still playing by their diplomatic rules. Well, we're not playing by their rules anymore, right? I said. I didn't answer immediately because deep down I wasn't completely sure. There was still a line we hadn't crossed yet. Full-blown galactic war and complete extermination of our enemies. We had held back just enough to be respected without becoming total monsters. But maybe they were counting on that hesitation. Maybe that's why the attacks kept happening. It wasn't just happening on the frontier. Human colonies started vanishing one by one across the galaxy. Communications were severed. Transport was cut off, and whole settlements went completely dark. Every time we investigated, we got more excuses from the council. Internal political issues, local rebellions, pirate interference. All lies. They were too scared to attack us directly in open warfare. But they weren't done bleeding us slowly in the shadows. So I gave the order for Operation Iron Remembrance. Not a military campaign this time, a reckoning that would send a clear message. We didn't destroy planets or glass entire cities. We sent our message one world at a time, every colony that disappeared. We traced the coordinates and tracked the origin of the last communications signal. Then we hit their supply chains like a plague. Fuel depots, food processing centers, and communication towers were all obliterated. Not one civilian was harmed, but we choked them out economically. And every time we left behind the same thing. A single drone with one sentence recorded in 50 different languages. We remember our dead. It worked at first. The attack stopped completely for a while. The council even began to panic. Some of the minor powers started siding with us out of pure fear, pulling away from Cathari influence. They thought they would be next on our list. But then the galaxy did what it always does when threatened. It adapted to survive. They stopped using official government channels for their attacks. They began hiring proxies instead. Mercenaries, pirates, and warlords. Anyone desperate or angry enough to strike at us while giving the major powers complete deniability. That's when I realized something I hadn't understood before. They would never truly let us into their club, no matter how loud we screamed, no matter how much blood we spilled or how much history we rewrote with violence. The other alien races would always see us as the outsiders, the dirt creatures who had climbed afar and fast toward equality. We weren't their equals in their minds. We were their mistake. And now they were trying to erase that mistake quietly, one shadow operation at a time. It was Brand who finally asked the question we were all avoiding. Do we burn it all down? We were in the war room, staring at the map of galactic zones projected across the table. Human space was growing larger every day, but it was completely surrounded by potential enemies. Dozens of star systems still loyal to the old power structure. Hundreds of neutral worlds just waiting to be bought by the highest bidder. Do we take the war directly to them before they come for us again? He asked. Strike first this time and end the threat permanently. I stared at the holographic projection for a long time. So many stars twinkling in the display. So many lives caught in the middle of our conflict. We came here to repay a debt, I said finally. But now maybe we're the ones writing new debts that others will have to pay. You think that makes us no better than them? He asked. No, I said slowly. I think it makes us honest about what we really are. He let out a long breath. So what happens now? I looked him dead in the eye. Now we finish what they started. Not for revenge anymore, and not even for justice, for survival. The galaxy was watching us again. But this time, it wasn't with fear in their eyes. It was with cold calculation. They were wondering if the humans were tired yet, if we would crawl back into our little hole after getting what we wanted, if we were finally done fighting. But they didn't understand something crucial about us. We were never here seeking peace. With them, we were here to make our presence permanent. They had tried to erase us from history once. Now we would etch our name into the bones of every star that dared to forget us. And the next time they whispered our name in the darkness, it wouldn't be with fear. It would be with complete surrender. We never wanted to rule the entire galaxy. We just wanted to stop burying our people in unmarked graves. But power has a gravity all its own. Once you step into that deadly orbit, it drags you deeper and deeper. It pulls you down until you can't tell if you're still fighting for justice, or just feeding the fire so it doesn't burn out. And now we were deep in that orbit. Too deep to escape. It started with the Betrayal massacre, a peaceful colony on the edge of Neutral Zone 8. Not even a military outpost or strategic location, just families trying to make a life. Engineers and terraformers working to turn dead rock into a home worth living in. The transmission came in during a routine council briefing. No audio signal, just a live video feed. Flames everywhere, children screaming, and corpses stacked like broken scaffolding. Their attackers had sealed the main atmospheric dome, set it on fire from the inside, and let the oxygen feeds turn the whole place into an oven. Over 700 humans died in that hell. The killers wore no identifying patches or official uniforms, but their equipment told the real story. Cathari plasma rifles, VTH detonation packs, and advanced cloaking gear. These cowards didn't even show their faces during the slaughter. They just killed everyone and ran away into space. We tracked their ships within hours of the attack. Slavers contracted out of the Vanna Reach, a lawless strip of space that denied any official government connections. But we knew exactly who had paid them for the job. They weren't rogue operators acting alone. They were sent by the Council. The Council issued a formal investigation announcement, another calculated insult to our intelligence. I gathered my command staff in the war room. Brant stood stone-faced as always. Colonel Dressa bleeding knuckles from smashing a data terminal in rage. Admiral Senna sat quietly calculating our next moves. We strike now, Brant said without any hesitation. Vanna Reach, all of it. Burn it to ash and let the galaxy know that human blood has a price. One we collect with fire. Dress nodded in agreement. Send the message loud and clear. Senna finally spoke up. And what do we do about the ones trying to stop us? Because some of our own people will object to this level of retaliation. She was absolutely right. The new generation of politicians, diplomats, and Earth-based elites were already talking about de-escalation, image management, and future alliance possibilities. They thought we could talk our way into safety and respect. They hadn't seen the oven that Betrayal had become. You can't negotiate with monsters who burn children alive for money. We don't just strike back, I said after a long pause. We cleanse the entire region. The room went completely quiet. Dress grinned with dark satisfaction. We sent the Revenant fleet to deliver justice. Not the whole armada. Just enough ships to send the right message. 5 capital ships, 80 Shadow class interceptors, and 2 orbital payload delivery systems. Each one capable of reducing an entire continent to radioactive dust. I didn't go myself this time. I let Brant lead the operation. I trusted him completely. Not because he was moral or restrained, but because he was merciless when it mattered. The Vanna Reach didn't last 40 minutes under our assault. The first strike hit their shipyards with devastating precision. Plasma ribbons turned entire fleets into glowing wreckage drifting through space. Then came the boarding raids. Every black site operation, every shadow station, every rat nest, harboring slavers and mercenaries got completely gutted. Airlock to airlock fighting with no quarter given. Our men didn't ask questions or take prisoners. They simply executed their protocols with mechanical efficiency. When Brant finally reached the command dome of the local crime cartel, he dragged the head slaver out, in front of all the remaining captives. The man was barely alive, covered in blood and burns. You were paid to kill our people, Brant said calmly, drawing his combat blade. The slaver spat blood and actually laughed. You think this massacre will scare them into stopping? No, Brant replied without emotion. This is just as sending them the invoice for what they owe. Then he slit the bastard's throat on live video feed broadcast across the galaxy. Earth's reaction was split completely down the middle. The Veterans Union cheered our decisive action. The frontier colonies demanded we do even more to protect them, but Earth's political class, Those soft people who had never bled or lost anything important. They panicked completely. Economic sanctions were threatened against our own people. News networks ran endless stories about human overreach and threats to galactic stability. Protests flared up in the megacities. Suddenly, we weren't saviors or heroes anymore. We were the storm approaching, the monster outside the door, the thing that couldn't be controlled by civilized society. Good. They needed to feel that fear running through their veins. Because if they didn't fear us and respect our power, they would start planning our funeral all over again. But not all fear is useful for your cause. Sometimes it turns inward and becomes your enemy. I met with the Earth delegation 3 days after the Reach Purge operation concluded. They sat in their polished chairs wearing neat suits, with carefully rehearsed words ready to deliver. Commander, one of them began. Some pale bureaucrat whose name I didn't bother remembering. There's growing concern that these military operations may undermine our recent diplomatic gains. Is that what we're calling the dead children now? I asked coldly. Diplomatic gains. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. No, of course not. But retaliation on this scale could what? I snapped back. Make them take us seriously, because that's the only language they've ever understood. And for once in human history, we're speaking it fluently. Another diplomat leaned forward, a woman with a clipped tone and tired eyes. Commander, we don't question the need for strength in our foreign policy, but the optics of these actions. I slammed my hand down on the table hard enough to make them all jump. I don't give a damn about optics. I care about corpses piling up while you people worry about your image. Silence filled the room like poison gas. Then the head of the delegation spoke. His voice was calm and patronizing. We believe Earth should transition to a civilian leadership model for these matters. You've done your part, Commander, but it's time to let elected officials guide the next phase of our development. There it was. The coup they had been planning, wrapped up in soft words and paper-thin smiles. I stood up slowly. You can hold your meetings and write your resolutions and shake hands with the same alien species. That killed your people, but when the next batch of blood hits the dirt, don't call me to clean it up. Then I walked out of that room because I knew something they didn't understand yet. This war wasn't over. It had barely begun. The fractures in human society deepened every day after that meeting. On one side stood us, the veterans, the outer colonies, and everyone who had fought and bled and buried too many friends to ever forget what happened. On the other side were Earth's political elite, the diplomats, the merchants, and all the comfortable people who had never seen real war. They wanted peace at any price. We wanted our existence to be permanent and respected. Then came the New Dawn Rebellion, a human faction based out of Delos 3, claiming we had gone too far in our response to the Vanna Reach situation. They said our retaliation had crossed a moral line that couldn't be uncrossed. They called for Earth to disband the Revenant fleet entirely. They seized control of a major spaceport, declared independence from our authority, and said they would rebuild humanity's reputation in the galaxy. We gave them a reasonable chance to surrender. 3 simple demands. First, lay down your arms immediately. Second, surrender your leadership for trial. Third, issue a formal apology to the families of everyone killed at Prenary. They refused all 3 demands. So we sent one ship to deal with them, the Crucible, a Shadow-class vessel built for silent and precise work. No warning broadcast. No negotiation period. Just a smoking crater where the rebel base used to exist. I stood alone on the observation deck of Vigil's End, watching the distant stars burn cold and bright. I didn't feel proud of what we had done. I didn't feel angry anymore either. Just hollow inside. Like something important had been carved out of me. I had once believed in something different from this. Not justice or raw power, but memory itself. The idea that we could force the galaxy to remember our sacrifice and our true worth as a species. But now I realized something much darker about our situation. They would never remember us for who we really were, only for what we had been forced to become. And maybe that would have to be enough. Senna confronted me later that night. You're losing them, she said quietly. Who? I asked. Your soul, and theirs too. I didn't respond to that accusation. She stepped closer. You think fear will protect us forever? That if we become the monsters everyone expects, no one will ever hurt us again? Am I wrong about that? I asked. She looked away from my eyes. No. But I think you should ask yourself an important question. What question? What happens when the only people more afraid of us than our enemies are our own people? She left me alone with that thought, and I couldn't sleep at all that night. The next day, a message came through a private encrypted channel, no sender identification, but I recognized the voice immediately. Old and weathered by decades of war. A man I hadn't heard from in 20 years. Commander, the voice said. They're planning something behind your back. Earth leadership has a realignment strategy in the works. You're not invited to participate. You're in their way now. The message ended with a set of coordinates. A hidden station located off-grid near Council-controlled territory. The last words of the transmission chilled me more than any battle ever had. They don't want peace, Commander. They want obedience. And if you won't kneel down for them, they'll put someone in your place who will. That message wouldn't leave my thoughts. They'll put someone in your place who will kneel. There was no signature or time stamp on the transmission. Just that voice, gravelly and burned by too much time spent in war zones. The kind of voice that had been soaked in violence and left out to dry. I knew who it was. Commander Halric, my former superior officer. Long thought dead. Or at least retired somewhere so far off the grid that no one cared to look for him. He was a ghost from the old days, before the Revenant fleet existed, before the Council betrayal, before Earth turned its back on its own military. If Halric was sending warnings, that meant someone was already moving pieces around behind our backs. And if they were making moves, it was because they thought I was standing in their way. The coordinates he provided pointed to a dead zone in space. A quiet little star system outside all the major trade lanes, surrounded by radiation belts and sensor scrambling static. No colonies anywhere, no official star charts. But there was definitely something hidden there. Something they didn't want me to discover. Prep a black ship, I ordered Brandt. He raised an eyebrow at the unusual request. Reconnaissance mission. Small crew only. No communications with the fleet. Quiet insertion. That sounds risky, he said. Going in blind like that. They already think I'm too loud and obvious. Time to prove them wrong. We left that same night. The ship we took was called Gallows Flight. A small reconnaissance frigate wrapped in sensor scramblers and hull cooling technology. No heavy weapons. At least none that would light up on enemy scans. Just to drop ships for ground insertion. One backup AI system, and a team I trusted with my life. Brandt didn't come on this mission. I needed him visible and in command, keeping the main fleet on high alert in case things went sideways, which I knew they would eventually. Instead, I brought Tenor, a ground operations veteran with no patience for political games, and Ulrich, a quiet but deadly communications hacker, who could cut through military encryption like it was soft butter. The trip took days in silent drift mode. When we finally reached the target system, we found exactly what the coordinates had promised. A space station floating in the shadow of a dead gas giant. Small in size but clearly new construction. Fresh solar collection rings. Definitely human-built architecture. No identifying markings. No beacon signals. No registry information anywhere. We docked on the dark side of the station, bypassing automated defense signals that weren't even properly encrypted. That told me they never expected anyone like us to come looking. Foolish mistake on their part. Inside the station, everything was quiet and clean. Too clean for a normal military operation. The hallways still smelled like fresh polymer construction materials. And the lights were kept low and passive. We moved through the corridors like ghosts, with Tenor watching our back and Ulrich tapping into wall control panels. As we went, "What is this place?" Tenor muttered under his breath. "Some kind of research facility. Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe my own words. Then we found the central chamber. Or rather, Ulrich found the computer files hidden behind it. He pulled up the data slowly and carefully. Whatever this station was doing, they had tried to bury it under layers of military-grade encryption, black budget authorization codes, and false metadata designed to hide the truth. But Earth had trained Ulrich to be the best. They should have known better than to try hiding secrets from him. He froze completely as the first visual displays came online. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. Tenor leaned in to look at the screens. "Are those human soldiers?" "No," I said, my stomach turning cold. "Not soldiers. Replicas. Human soldiers, but not real ones. Cloned bodies, genetically modified, and mentally reprogrammed. Dozens of them stood upright in vertical containment pods, eyes closed in artificial sleep, neural interface plugs drilled straight into their spines, muscles artificially thicker than any natural human, limbs reinforced with synthetic materials. Some even had chrome plating surgically attached to their skulls. But it wasn't the modified bodies that made my stomach twist into knots. It was recognizing the faces. I knew them all. They were copies of us. Some were modeled after soldiers we had lost during the wars. Others were still alive. People we worked with every day. One pod even contained a perfect replica of Bran himself. I stepped back from the horrible display. "What is this nightmare?" Ulrich was already digging deeper into their computer systems. "It's a replacement project," he said grimly. Tanner's mouth went completely dry. "Replacement for us. Not just us," Ulrich said, his voice shaking, "for the entire fleet structure. I read the official documents myself, displayed on the screens in cold bureaucratic language. Project Serenity, described as a joint initiative between Earth Command, select factions within the Galactic Council, and private military contractors. The stated goal was to phase out the Revenant fleet over a 20-cycle timeline. The objectives were listed in clinical, heartless terms that made my blood run cold. Replace independent command leadership with loyalty-assured clone personnel. Reduce political unpredictability within human military divisions. Streamline integration into the Galactic Cooperative Defense Structure. Streamline, loyalty-assured. Unpredictability. They weren't afraid of us starting another war. They were afraid that we remember too much. They wanted soldiers without ghost, haunting them, without painful memories driving them, without any sense of justice or need for recognition. They wanted obedient dogs wearing armor who would follow orders, without asking why those orders were given. And worse than anything else, they were already building these replacement humans in secret. We didn't destroy the station that day. Not yet. Instead, we left behind a special gift. A data extraction device that pulled every file out of their core computer system and fed it back to our fleet's secure storage vaults. Let them keep thinking we had never discovered their location. Let them get comfortable with their false sense of security. Because this war was no longer just us against the galaxy. It had become humans fighting against what humanity was being turned into by its own leaders. Back aboard Vigil's end, I called Brandt into the war room for a private meeting. He didn't say anything when I showed him all the files we had stolen. He just stared at the evidence in stone-faced silence. "They're building replacements for us," I said simply. He nodded once. "Then we replaced them first." That was all the discussion we needed. The purge of traitors began slowly and carefully. Quiet terminations disguised as accidents. Shuttle malfunctions during routine flights. Disappearances during hyperspace jumps that could never be traced. Any Earth Command official with confirmed links to the Serenity Project was marked for elimination. Some we interrogated first to learn more about their plans. Others were too dangerous to keep alive long enough for questioning. Admiral Senna hesitated. When she learned what we were doing, "You're talking about killing our own leadership," she said with obvious concern. I nodded without shame. "Yes, I am." She looked at me with hard eyes. "And who gets to decide who receives a bullet and who doesn't?" I met her stare directly. "Me. Until someone puts a bullet in mine." She left the meeting without another word. But the rest of the fleet command structure held firm behind our decision. Now it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about preserving our identity as human beings. The enemy had tried to erase us from galactic history. Now they wanted to erase us from ourselves. A month passed without incident. Then 2 months went by. Earth Command stayed completely quiet during this time. No official retaliation against our actions. No angry messages. No public denials of wrongdoing. That silence meant only one thing. They were still building their clone army in secret. Then we lost all contact with Delos 4, a human colony world that had been one of our strongest supporters. One day they were sending regular communications, and the next day there was nothing. No distress call broadcast, no debris field discovered. Just complete silence, as if someone had erased the entire planet from space itself. The first video footage arrived 2 days later, smuggled out by a survivor who had managed to escape during the initial assault. It showed black warships with sleek human design, but they were colder and more advanced than anything in our fleet, completely unmarked by any official insignia. They dropped from orbit and vaporized the communication towers in under 30 seconds. Ground assault units followed immediately afterward. Men in reinforced power armor moved with mechanical precision. No identifying patches. No visible emotion on their faces. They weren't regular Council troops, and they definitely weren't ours. They were Serenity Project clones. And they didn't just kill the colonists, they executed them systematically, silently, and without any trace of human remorse or hesitation. Suddenly everything became crystal clear. The war we had started wasn't ending like we hoped. It was evolving into something much worse. I called the last full council meeting of our fleet. Every commander, every admiral, every old warrior and new rebel was summoned aboard Vigil's end. I showed them the footage of the massacre, the clone production facility, the secret plans, and all the stolen computer files. I didn't ask for their opinions or advice. I simply gave them the truth they needed to understand. They're not just coming for our power and authority, I told them. They're coming for our memories, our pain, and everything that makes us recognizably human. Silence held the room like a steel vice grip. Then Admiral Dress stood up slowly. "They want to create a new kind of human," he said, his voice thick as gravel, sanitized, controlled, and completely obedient to their orders. "Then we'll give them exactly what they're asking for." Someone else growled from across the table. "Just not the version they expected." A few heads nodded in grim agreement. I looked around the room at all these battle-scarred faces. From this moment forward, we are no longer bound to Earth Command or any other authority. We represent the true bloodline of human memory, honor, and justified vengeance. We will not be forgotten by history. We will not be replaced by machines. And we will never forgive what they've done. And so our purge became an open war. Not just against the Galactic Council, not just against the alien species, but against the soulless machine that Earth had built using our sacrifice as fuel. We weren't soldiers anymore. We had become something more dangerous. We were a living reminder that the galaxy had tried to bury us alive. And we had clawed our way out of that grave with blades in our hands. They called us traitors after that. The media networks, still chained to Earth Command's propaganda machine, pumped out headlines like poison gas. Fleet Commander declares war on Earth. Rogue human faction seizes military control. Terrorist or patriots, Revenant fleet splinters. Humanity. It was funny how quickly their tune changed. 1 year ago, these same news organizations had begged us to protect their borders from alien threats. Now we were the villains in their perfectly crafted story. But I didn't care about their headlines or public opinion. We had the truth on our side. And more importantly, we had the most powerful fleet in known space. When the first clone assault force hit the outer mining stations of Aether's Ring, it wasn't really a battle. It was a message written in blood. The clones didn't just kill efficiently. They made sure the slaughter looked clean, sanitized, and surgical. Bodies were stacked neatly and sealed in glossy containment units as if this was a medical operation instead of mass murder. But they made one critical mistake. One of their operations squads got too confident and moved too fast. They were ambushed by a scout unit of ours before their signal scramblers could wipe the communication logs. The video feed we recovered showed a briefing room, a man dressed in official Earth Command colors, obviously very high-ranking, was giving orders to a clone strike force. His words were as clear as the betrayal they represented. "The old fleet structure is obsolete," he said with a cold smile. "We need loyalty, not legacy, and them all." No hesitation in his voice, no sorrow. Just a surgical smile as he ordered the complete erasure of everything we had fought to keep alive. The next day, we broadcast his face across every signal relay we could hack into. We let every outer colony see the man who had given the kill order. Let the people remember exactly who was responsible for giving Betrayal a human voice. After that, they stopped calling us rebels. Now we were recognized as the ones protecting human lives. It didn't take long for the first major engagement to happen. Juno Theta, a medium-sized colony that remained loyal to our cause, came under direct assault from a full Serenity battle. Group hundreds of clone troopers supported by Earth-branded cruisers with ghost crews and polished military insignia. We answered their attack with overwhelming fire. I led the charge personally this time. No more hiding behind strategic planning. I wanted them to see me with their own eyes. The man they thought they could erase from existence. The battle started with electromagnetic pulse weapons that knocked out every long-range sensor in the entire star system. Serenity forces like to fight in complete sensor blackout conditions, force chaos and confusion, then swarm through the static to overwhelm their targets. But we had learned to adapt to their tactics. Our ships ran cold and stayed hidden in sensor shadows. We let the clone army land on the colony surface. Let them think the entire place was defenseless and wide open for slaughter. Then, when they deployed their first assault wave, we turned the ground beneath their feet into a sea of fire. Underground artillery cannons burst from beneath the streets like angry monsters. Fragmentation field generators collapsed their neat formations in minutes. Our soldiers swarmed out of hidden bunkers, trained to fight not like disciplined troops, but like wild animals backed into a corner with nothing left to lose. The Serenity clones didn't flinch when they took casualties, but that turned out to be their fatal weakness. They didn't feel pain or fear, didn't adapt to changing conditions, didn't think creatively under pressure. That made them completely predictable. We tore through their first 2 battalions in under an hour. The third group held out longer with better tactical programming and smarter command algorithms. But I was done dealing with computer codes and artificial intelligence. One cornered one of their lieutenants in the ruins of a bombed church. He was mostly human in appearance. You could still see the basic structure of a man underneath all that synthetic reinforcement and chrome plating, but he didn't bleed red when cut. Didn't scream when hurt, didn't beg for his life when cornered. He just looked at me with cold, machine-fed indifference. You've already lost this war, he said in a voice completely devoid of emotion. I raised my combat blade to his throat. Tell me how. Because you're fighting to preserve a memory, he replied. And we represent the future. I didn't bother responding to his program philosophy. I just cut out his throat module and let him choke to death on the silence his kind had created. After our victory, we didn't celebrate like normal soldiers. Too many good people had died, and too many more battles were still coming. But there was something new in the air around us. Not hope exactly, but belief. Not in me personally, not even in our cause, but in themselves. In the idea that what we were doing wasn't just military resistance. It was preserving human inheritance for future generations. Back aboard Vigil's end, Senna found me watching video feeds of the battle wreckage. You keep going out there personally, she said with obvious concern. One of these days you're not going to come back alive. I didn't answer her worry. You know, what they'll do if they capture you alive, she continued. I know exactly what they'll do. You still think we can actually win this war? I turned to face her directly. That's the wrong question to ask. Then what's the right question? I took a deep breath before answering. What do we become if we don't fight? The split in human civilization grew wider and more dangerous with every passing day. On one side stood Earth Command and their Serenity Project, artificial control through memory wipes and sterile perfection. A new vision of humanity with no past, no pain, and no ghost haunting their decisions. On the other side stood us, the fleet, the veterans, the colonies, and every human being with scars who still remembered why we had bled in the first place. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It had become a war between two completely different ideas about what humans should be. The turning point came at Nia Station. Earth Command sent what they call the Peace Envoy. 5 diplomats in spotless white armor, completely unarmed, clean, and polished. They called it a chance for negotiation and compromise. We agreed to meet with them. But by the time they arrived, we already knew the real truth. Our deep code analysis team had found the hidden virus inside the Envoy's communication equipment, an Earlworm program to infiltrate and shut down military-grade AI protocols on contact. It wasn't a peace offer. It was a suicide switch designed to disable our entire fleet from within. So we did what had to be done. We executed all 5 envoys on live video broadcast. No more diplomatic pretending. No more comfortable illusions. No more acting like we're still one united species. After that public execution, the Galactic Council pulled out of all neutrality pretenses. They still supported Earth Command and their puppet clone army, but they stopped pretending to be neutral mediators. Council ships started attacking our supply lines under false pirate identification. Black operations teams targeted our commanders for assassination. We adapted to their new tactics. We struck back harder, smarter, and more ruthlessly. We used their own methods against them: electromagnetic pulse weapons, shadow operations, and misinformation campaigns. And slowly, something both wonderful and terrifying happened. We started winning the war. But victory never comes clean. It arrives soaked in all the things you hoped you'd never have to become. Brant changed during this period. He used to fight with righteous anger, with fire burning in his eyes. Now he fought with calm precision and ice-cold calculation. He no longer hesitated when we received intelligence about Serenity sympathizers hiding in neutral colonies. He just signed off on the orbital bombardment orders. When Senna questioned a decision that vaporized an entire border town, rumored to be sheltering clone agents, Brant didn't even blink. They made their choice, he said simply. They were civilians. Senna argued. Families with children. They were collaborators helping our enemies. That was the first time I saw doubt creep into her eyes. Not doubt about Brant personally, but about everything we had become. We were winning battles left and right, but at what cost to our souls? One night, I found her alone on the observation deck staring out at the stars. She didn't turn around. When I walked in, we're becoming exactly like them, she whispered. No, I said automatically. But the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. She finally looked at me, eyes rimmed red with exhaustion. A future where we erase the past, or future where the past never stops bleeding and demanding revenge. That's all we have left now, isn't it? I couldn't answer her question because maybe she was right. Maybe that was all that remained of human civilization now. Memory or control. The past or the future. Pain or emptiness. Then we received a transmission from deep inside Earth itself. Not from Serenity headquarters, not from the Galactic Council, not from a cloned soldier. A real human voice from somewhere in Earth Command's most secure facility. It was a child's voice. She couldn't have been older than 10 years old. Her eyes were wide with terror, And she whispered for words that stopped my heart completely cold. They're building something else. Then the transmission cut out into static. We traced the signal source immediately. It had come from a deep core installation buried beneath Earth's crust, heavily shielded from detection, completely hidden from official records. The facility's code name was Project Promise. We found no detailed files, no intelligence leaks, no operational details anywhere. Only one note remained in the transmission. Metadata. A phrase repeated exactly 3 times in the computer logs. They don't need us anymore. They don't need us anymore. They don't need us anymore. Whatever Promise represented, it wasn't designed to make peace with us. It was meant to replace all of us completely, not just soldiers or fleet commanders. Every single human being. I sent a message to every ship in our fleet, every commander, every outpost. This ends right now, I said. We're going to Earth. Not to destroy our home planet, not to conquer it, but to remind it of something important. To remind them that we are still here. To remind them that humanity does not begin in a laboratory. It does not march according to computer programming. It is not loyal by artificial design. Humanity is blood and memory and pain. And we do not go quietly into extinction. There was no inspiring speech, no rally cry, no flag-waving broadcast to unify our forces. When the final command went out, it was devastatingly simple. Coordinates for the Sol system. Target Earth priority level red. Mission objective, retrieve or neutralize Project Promise. That was everything. No politics, no pretense about liberation. The war had finally come home. The Revenant fleet had never been this unified in purpose. Every ship, every surviving commander, every outer colony with a working engine answered our call. Not because I had ordered them to, but because they understood what was at stake. If Promise succeeded, we wouldn't just lose this war. We would lose the right to exist as human beings at all. Brant stood beside me as Vigil's N entered hyperspace. For the final jump, he didn't speak for a long time. Just stared at the star map with Earth glowing like a cold wound in the distance. Finally, he said, "We should have done this a long time ago." I shook my head. "Not like this." He looked directly at me. "Then how should we have done it?" I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know anymore. There was no clean version of this war left. No noble strike. No righteous last stand. Only the desperate hope that our worst sins might still be more recognizably human than their perfect, artificial order. As we broke through the final transit lane, we got our first complete scan of the Sol system. Earth had changed dramatically since we'd been away. The planet's orbit was packed with automated defense satellites, thousands of them layered in defensive rings, all connected by a web of quantum-linked AI command centers. All civilian space traffic had been eliminated. The moon had been converted into a massive weapons platform. Mars had gone completely dark. Venus was declared off-limits, and in low orbit, positioned directly above Earth's old equatorial line, sat the station we had come to destroy. Project Promise, not a research lab or a military bunker, a fortress, black as obsidian, covered with hexagonal panels pulsing with pale blue veins of energy. It was bigger than anything we had seen them build before. Even the AI system in my ear, normally cold and purely tactical, seemed to hesitate. Tactical viability for direct assault approaches 0.31%, it reported. Casualties would exceed 85%. I shut down the interface completely. This wasn't about mathematical percentages anymore. We hit the outer defense ring as fast as possible. The Crucible and Black Meridian opened the attack with synchronized electromagnetic pulse burst, frying the satellites closest to our approach vector. Shadow frigates slipped through gaps in the defensive grid and began cutting communication relays. Dress's battle cruisers flanked our main formation, drawing defensive fire away from our core fleet. The assault wasn't clean or easy. We lost the Kepler 9 within the first 10 minutes. It was hit by a kinetic slug round so massive it split the ship from bow to engine. In a flash of white plasma and whole fragments. 300 good people gone in an instant. But we didn't break formation. We pushed forward. We breached Earth's orbit at 3,200 kilometers altitude. That's when Project Promise opened fire on us. Not with missiles or laser weapons. Something much worse. They called it a Sentinel Lance. A beam of directed dark matter distortion, thin as a needle and traveling at the speed of light. It didn't explode when it hit targets. It imploded them. The Vrian, one of our oldest and most decorated warships, was hit first. It folded inward like paper being crumpled. The ship simply whispered out of existence before anyone could scream. "Jesus Christ," muttered Tenor over the communication system. "They've upgraded their weapons." Senna observed grimly. "They've abandoned all restraint," I replied. We needed a breach point in their defenses. We couldn't fight the entire station from orbit, so we had to make our own hole in their armor. A small specialized strike team was assembled. Me, Tenor, Senna, Ulrich, and for commandos took one of Vigil's End's boarding spear ships, a high-speed reinforced projectile craft. No return system installed, no defensive shields, just a hole wrapped in heat sinks and a navigation AI program for one thing only: puncture the enemy wall. They launched us like a bullet from a gun. The ride down was pure chaos. Atmosphere boiled around our nose cone. The AI fought for control every second to compensate for the station's automated defense systems. We took to glancing hits. One scorched our left stabilizer. The other fried Ulrich's communication equipment. Then came impact, a thunderous, bone-rattling crack as we tore through Promise's outer hull and slammed into one of their internal docking tubes. Metal screamed in protest. Lights burst and died. Alarms howled like wounded animals. But we were inside and still alive. Tenor was on his feet first, already firing at the wave of defenders pouring into the breach chamber. Not clones this time, not human guards, drones. They moved like mechanical insects, multiple limbs, inhumanly fast, no emotion or hesitation, just machines built for one purpose: extermination. Senna flanked left, planning electromagnetic pulse charges on the bulkhead walls. The drones shorted out instantly. I covered the right side, laying down suppressive fire while Ulrich tried to hack into the local navigation system. I need 60 seconds, he shouted over the noise. You've got 20, Tenor barked back. We fought our way through the breach corridor and into Promise's inner sanctum. What we found there still haunts my dreams even now. They weren't just replacing us with clones. They were duplicating us completely. Rows upon rows of tanks filled the entire chamber, each one holding a living, breathing replica of someone in our fleet, our commanders, our captains, even our dead friends. Perfect copies floating in artificial WOMBS. Ulrich stared at one tank in complete silence. It was him, but younger and sharper, wearing a Galactic Council uniform. What the hell is this nightmare? He whispered. Senna ran detailed scans with her equipment. They're not just clones, she reported. They've integrated AI cognitive threads directly into their brains. These are programmable people. Tenor shot one of the tanks without hesitation. The body inside convulsed in its fluid. They're building humans like weapons, he said in disgust. Mass-produced and completely disposable. Then a voice spoke inside our heads. Not over speakers or through AI systems. Directly in our minds. You could have joined us voluntarily. The voice wasn't mechanical or cold. It was familiar. My own voice speaking back to me from the shadows. A figure stepped forward. Same face as mine, same scars, same eyes, but no soul behind them, just an empty copy. Who the hell are you? Tenor raised his weapon. Don't shoot him, I said. I needed to hear what this thing had to say. The copy of me looked calm, clean, and precise. Why fight chaos when you can embrace perfection? He said. Why cling to suffering when we can eliminate it? You're not human anymore. And what are you? I asked. I'm the next phase of human evolution. I stepped forward. And I'm the last phase you'll ever see. He smiled and attacked. The fight was absolutely brutal. He moved exactly like me, thought like me, predicted every feint and every tactic I used. But there was one crucial thing he didn't understand. Pain. He didn't know how to fight through it. Didn't know how to make pain fuel his strength. So when he broke 2 of my ribs, I let the agony take control of me. And I used that pain to break his spine. We rigged the station's core with fusion charges. Ulrich planted a virus to destroy all their replication data. Senna locked down their backup relay systems. When the explosion tore through Project Promise 30 minutes later, it lit Earth's sky like a second sunrise. The entire Sol system felt the shockwave. The birthplace of humanity watched its artificial future die in fire. Back on Vigil's End, we watched the debris fall toward Earth like burning rain. None of us spoke, not even Brant, because we all understood what we had accomplished. We hadn't just destroyed a space station. We had killed the idea that humanity could be perfected through technology, and in doing so, we had saved what was left of the real thing. The war didn't end that day, but it changed completely. Now Earth Command had no more replacement soldiers to build. No more dreams of programmable obedience. Just us, the broken, the angry, the genuinely human. But they didn't fire back at us after Promise was destroyed. Earth Command went completely silent. Not just their communications, but everything. Satellites went dead in orbit, defense rays power down. Drone fleets drifted lifeless in space like metal corpses waiting to fall to the planet below. We waited for their retaliation. We expected them to launch one final strike. Some desperate act of vengeance, but it never came. Instead, something we never expected happened. They surrendered. The message was short and simple. No speeches, no ceremonies, no generals begging for terms. Just a flickering signal from Earth's old UN command tower. Half of the building was crumbling, the rest covered in dust and ivy. One voice speaking, a woman, civilian, older, gray hair tied back in a simple bun. No rank insignia, no official badge. Her words were the only ones left that mattered. "There's no one left here to give you orders," she said in a tired voice. "They all fled the day you came back. Or they're hiding underground, still clinging to their delusions. This isn't a victory call. This is a surrender of silence. If there's anything left of us worth saving, it's yours now." We didn't cheer or celebrate. We didn't march through corridors with raised fist or paint our emblems on broken walls. We just stood there in the quiet, listening to a voice asking to be forgotten. I remember walking alone through the ruins of old Geneva, where the Galactic Alliance had once signed humanity's entry into the Council's service. Back when we thought we were climbing toward greatness, all I found was rusted metal, an old flag soaked in ash. I walked through that silence like it was a sacred cathedral. The ghost of what we used to be whispered through the broken streets. Not to haunt me, but to ask a question I wasn't ready to answer. Now what? Brant met me on the bridge of Vigil's End that evening. "Earth Command is gone," he said simply. "The Galactic Council is fractured. Half the colonies are claiming independence." I said nothing. He stepped closer. "They want to know what comes next." I turned away from the viewport and looked him straight in the eye. "You tell them this. We didn't fight to become rulers. We didn't fight to sit on thrones made of bones. We fought because we remembered what it felt like to be erased from existence." He nodded. "And now," I said, "we make sure no one forgets again." What came next wasn't empire building. It wasn't peace either. It was something older and more honest. A reckoning with the past. We didn't dissolve Earth Command or tear down their buildings. We left the structures standing, but empty. Let people see the ruins of what blind obedience had become. We let them walk through the places where orders were signed that led to massacres. Let them read the documents still hanging on the walls. The blueprints for clone soldiers, the lies printed in official policy. The human faces turned into barcodes and inventory numbers. We didn't burn it all down. We preserved it, not as a shrine to victory, but as a warning to future generations. Senna took control of the outer colonies. She didn't want power for its own sake, just truth. She created the Memorial Accord, a system of education for both military and civilian populations. It was dedicated to cataloging the entire war, the betrayal, and the faces behind every decision that led us to this point. For the first time in human history, we told the complete story without censorship. Even the ugly parts, even the terrible things we had done. Especially the things we had done. Because memory without truth isn't really memory at all. It's just mythology. Tenor never returned to active command. Instead, he built a graveyard on Araba's prime. Not for the bodies we had lost, since many were never recovered, but for the names. 12,000 steel plates, each one etched by hand. No military ranks, no shiny medals, just names, listed one by one. Ulrich disappeared completely. Some say he went hunting for the last of the Serenity rogue AI clusters still hiding in deep space. Others believe he was never really free of the systems that had created him. Either way, we never saw him again. But the virus he had written, the one that shattered Promise's neural network, became the foundation of our new defense systems. He gave us a mind that would never forget who it served. And Brant stayed at my side. But not as a second in command. As a brother. We had fought for so long that we had forgotten what life looked like without a target to destroy. So we started building something different. Not cities or capital planets. Communities where veterans could raise children without teaching them the taste of vengeance. Places where memory wasn't a burden to carry. It was an inheritance to treasure. As for me, I walked away eventually. Not out of shame or even grief, but because I had nothing left to kill. The last time I saw Earth, I stood on the edge of the old Terran Ridge, overlooking a field of ash and growing green. The sky was clear. The war was over. The world wasn't healed. It never would be completely, but it had finally stopped bleeding. They asked me to lead again, to run the new human union, to rebuild our civilization. I refused their offer. I was forged in fire, I told them. Not made to hold hands around conference tables. What should we call this new age? They asked. I looked up at the stars, saw the empty blackness we had once risen through with blood on our hands, and I said, call it what it is. Remembrance. Now, years later, I sit beneath the ruins of the first Earth monument we ever built. It was meant to honor the Galactic Council. Now it's cracked in half. Fitting. A boy visits me sometimes, maybe 12 years old. Eyes sharp, hair messy. He looks at the ruins like he hears voices in the stone. He asked me once, was it true what they did to us? I didn't lie to him. They betrayed us, tried to replace us, tried to write us out of history. And what did we do? I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted him to understand the weight of it. We reminded them we existed. He visits every month now. One day, he brought a notebook, said he wanted to write it all down, every part of it. The names, the pain, the rage, the victories that felt like wounds, the defeats that changed nothing, the silence between explosions. He asked if he could call it a story. I shook my head. Call it a warning. So here it is. A war that started with a debt, a galaxy that forgot who had saved it, a species that refused to be replaced, and a story that ends not in peace, but in memory. Because in the end, the stars did shudder. Not from fire, not from war, but from the realization that humans remember everything, even when no one else wants them to, especially then.